This is the Seven Figure Standard Podcast, hosted by Arash Vasugi and Mikey Stiller, with mindset and strategies to help you break through and create personal freedom.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Seven Figure Standard Podcast. I'm Mikey Stiller, joined by my co-host, Arash Vasugi, and we're so happy to be back with you for another episode. Arash, how are you doing?
I'm great, Mikey. How are you?
I am doing great as well. So we were just talking before the show, and we've talked before on here about identity. It's a big topic that you teach about. But today we're going to talk specifically about identity and how to build an identity that is completely separate from your results or from whatever's going on in the outside world. So will you start us off there?
Yeah, the biggest thing where people get stuck is they're tying their identity to their results. So when they're doing good, they feel really good. When they're not, they feel less than. And they're neither, if you look at it, they're the same. And their worth is the same. It's what they're attaching it to. We've talked a lot in previous episodes how dangerous attachment is. If anything we're attached to, it owns us. So we want to be so separate, but we've got to put a big emphasis on identity. There's a huge misunderstanding on it. And I know I used to have one where, oh no, this isn't part of my identity. And I felt bad. I didn't even want to look at it. And there was no better recipe why I was failing. Once you start looking at it and building it and understanding how important identity is to you, because it's the foundation of everything you're creating. And so if everybody just looks at their results neutrally, that's where their identity is currently conditioned at. But we want to create an identity based on not what I get, but who I become. That is the most important thing to attracting a world-class life for anybody. It's really getting comfortable in their own skin. Like I'm always talking about how good haters are. Like if they're not hating you, you're not doing anything. They don't hate on people that are not doing great shit. And a lot of people really stop showing themselves in the world because they're worried about what somebody is thinking of them. That's identity. Mm-hmm. And it was funny, before we started, I wrote a little note down that I'm going to create into a concept. And I wrote, you will not live an outstanding life if you're hiding. And I watch too many people hiding. They're not showing their authentic self. And that's identity. But if we look at identity and how we're going to build it, it's always who do I want to become? Not who do I want to become based on what I did last year or what I've done so far this year. It's who do you really want to become? Don't increase it 5%, increase it 5,000%. Mm-hmm. Like you've got to define who you want to be. Now, I could tell you this, when I first got into this information, I was the epitome of somebody that was struggling. Mm-hmm. And I remember writing out exactly how I wanted to live. But did I believe what I wrote? No way. There's no way I wrote it, but it started activating by just putting pen to paper, because pen to paper started breathing life into the person I wanted to be, not what I've always been. But before I even knew identity, that's what I was doing. I was reshaping my identity because I was dreaming. Most people are minimizing their dreams and they stop dreaming. Your identity, and I've said this before, but I want everybody to really lock this in. Your identity is based on the standards and commitments you have for yourself. So we can look at our results right now. That is the standards and commitments we've been showing. There's no ifs, there's no, let me rationalize. It just is. And your standards, as you build higher and higher standards, then it's what you're saying yes to, but it's shedding your old identity. And now, somebody that's tied to the results as their identity, which, look, I can relate to because I used to do it. it's just results driven. And I'm big on results. I think the results always tell us a story, but we don't want the results to control us or be tied to it, or else we're going to constantly be stuck. And it's like a roller coaster. You're going to go up, you're going to go down. Your identity is what you're committed to on the deepest level of who you are. See, if we look at what identity means, it's the most accurate picture of how we see ourselves. Now, you can change it, but you can never outperform it. And I think that statement broke me free. I said, oh my God, I don't always have to be this story. I can change my story. And it really set me free. But we're all committed to a set of standards. People are always asking me about standard. And to me, it's very cut and dry. You decide how you're going to live and you bring everything up to your standard. And you start defining what are my top 5 standards that I'm going to live with each year. And you keep incorporating them and saying yes to those. Mm-hmm. Now, your old self is going to want to say no to them. Your old self is going to want to conform back to your old set of standards. But that's when the standards never elevate. And if the standards never elevate, your identity never elevates. So you're always going to be controlled by the outside unless you set in standards. And I am not letting the outside control me, but I am going to pay the price and I'm going to show up 1% better every single day. And I'm going to define exactly who I want to become.
Raj, that person that you just described, the one who is so attached to the outside world and they're on a roller coaster, up, down, depending on the results, that's where their identity is. That's how they feel. I think you would agree that that is the masses. That's where a lot of people land until they become aware of identity and work on building a new identity. But my question is, when you're in that state, would you call that a false identity or a poor identity?
I'd call it just a current identity. I wouldn't call it either because I don't want to judge it. Like I would just say that's what their current identity is.
Okay.
Like, I'm not a better person today than I was 17 years ago. Like I was a good person 17 years ago. I'm a more aware person. I'm doing more good because my thinking has changed. I'm doing more good because I've changed my whole inside life. Mm-hmm. I've changed from the inside because everything just is. So when we put a judgment, I never look at a client and be like, oh, they got a shit identity. I just look at them and I'm like, oh, that's their gap. That's what we want to shift. So I don't look at identity as a bad thing. If somebody is not doing it, I look at, do they want to change it? So when we start looking at everything just is, then we're going to get to the truth. And that's where neutral is. And neutral is when we have the greatest power. And how do you change identity? You get into action. You change your thinking. You change who you hang around. If somebody wants to be a millionaire, their top 5 people they should be hanging around are other millionaires. They're going to become one. But they keep holding on to their old story and they're saying, why isn't it changing? They do the same action steps. Why isn't it changing? Nothing changes identity quicker than the actions you take. Like action and doing it now is going to change somebody's identity so dramatically. But why do we get tied is a better question. Why do we get tied to the results and attach our identity to the results? And it's because we're not thinking. We're not thinking about who do I want to become. We're not even aware. Most people are not even aware they're doing it. So we've got to start getting really good at being aware of our energy. When we're in low energy, when we're stressed, when we're operating with some sort of anxiety, we've got to stop it right there and take a 5-minute break. Mm-hmm. Because if you don't give yourself a break, you're going to put all your energy is on a depletion of energy, what doesn't make you feel good. We want to put all our energy on things that inspire us, not things that take from us. So let me give you an example. People are constantly taking personally what somebody else is saying. Why? Because they're taking everything like it's an attack on them, but maybe that person had a bad moment. Or why don't you ask, is this directed at me? Everything's a mirror because it's more about that person. But that is bringing their identity down. People are not taking actions because they're letting their bank account control them. They're letting their past failures control them. So what do you think their identity is? And that's why we have to get really good. I see like I talk about this all the time. There's a difference between high performers and world-class performers. High performers are still insecure, and there's nothing wrong with it, but they don't have to live that way because they're going to always be on a roller coaster. But the world-class performers is always trusting. They're constantly obsessed with getting better. And a result doesn't work, they say, I get to do it better.
Mhm.
See, if somebody is telling you there's only one way to do something, run. That was the way that worked for them. There isn't just one way to do something, there's always a better way. And that's why quantum leaps are about elimination. So if you look at like our identity, just this year, what did we change the most? We eliminated a lot of things we outgrew. So you can't keep doing what you've been doing and getting to massive quantum leaps. It doesn't happen. You have to constantly transform yourself. And as you're doing that, you're taking responsibility that this isn't going to work anymore. What got me to X is not going to get me to Y. And once we start doing that, everything is a process of transformation, and it's a process of transforming into our future self, into that new identity. And that's what breaks people through.
I really, really love the way you answered my question and explained that and talked about remaining neutral and not judging yourself. And I want to ask you, so if you don't measure your identity against your results, what do you measure your identity against? Is it your disciplines, your processes?
It's your processes. Your processes create the results by default. See, people want to be attached to the result, but they don't take the time to ask themselves, how did I show up? Did I have confidence? Did I have courage? Did I practice the power of five? So we live by design when we have a certain set of processes. And my goal is always to upgrade the processes, always upgrade them. And when we upgrade them, it's going to dramatically transform your life. You know, I created a process 2 weeks ago called the winning process. We should do a podcast episode just on that.
Yeah.
And I simplified it. I created this new process of deconstructing what I've done better and better at that I can duplicate. And that's how I create processes, is what I can continue to duplicate.
Raj, this is so fantastic. Okay, so you are big on asking yourself questions. And I think this goes back to the no judgment as well. So whenever you're looking at your processes, you just asked a couple of questions. You said, am I doing my processes? Am I committed to my processes? You might even ask yourself, did I get 1% better at my processes today? And you ask yourself that, and then you don't beat yourself up over it, but you also don't lie to yourself. You answer honestly. So I want you to talk about your process every day that you go through.
I mean, I ask questions throughout the whole day. I'm always asking because I know what I did today is creating my future identity. I'm big on identity. I think it's the foundation of living a worthy life, a life where it's full of fulfillment and inspiration. So I'm not always perfect, and I don't have to be always perfect. That's why I ask questions, because I could be coasting through the day and catching myself with the question. Then I could put my foot on the gas and get super hyper intentional if I went into default mode. You know, everything is a distraction from our goal. Everything is, unless we're hyper intentional and unless our want is so strong. Our want has to be through the roof, or there's no reason for me not to be attached to the outside result. You know, but when your want is strong and you have an authentic want, there's a reason for you to be, oh, interesting. I've got to course correct this. You know, if you look at a rocket flying to the moon, it fails its way 90 some percent. Yet we think success is linear. It's never linear. We're failing our way to the goal. And when we understand that, the rocket doesn't say, oh, I failed, so I'm going to come back down. Like, it doesn't have a chance. It's constantly course correcting. That's what you're doing when you're asking questions. But you want to ask them without beating yourself up and putting yourself down. And when you do that, that's what happens. See, I'll get clients, Mike, they'll ask me, some of them, I have this accountability check-in where they text me and they'll say, oh, I failed for the day. That's not good enough for me. You know what my question to them is always? Why? Why did you start? Instead of just saying I failed for the day. There's a reason you didn't want it bad enough. And discipline is so simple. If you really look at it, we've got to do the things we know we should do and start saying no to the things that we know we shouldn't do. That's discipline.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm talking about with accepting and rejecting ideas. People are saying yes to what they should say no to, and say no to what they should say yes to. But we have to, once you start building one discipline at a time, you're really building an identity. You're starting to respect yourself. When you get out of your comfort zone, you're building a new identity. So we've got to just stop saying, I fail. That's not good enough. Why? Where was I thinking? Where was my lack of motivation? What triggered it that allowed me to keep negotiating with myself? And when we start understanding ourselves, then you're going to start taking yourself more seriously, and you're going to start increasing your worth and your value so much.
You went exactly where I was going right before I did, because I was going to say, we can't talk about building a strong identity without going into discipline. And I'm so glad that you did. And you brought up something really interesting there. You said, why did you fail? Did you not have the motivation? And I want you to talk about how, regardless of motivation, a world-class performer does it anyways.
Well, this is where courage comes in. Courage is when you don't want to do the things and still doing them.
Yeah.
Courage is when you don't see the results and you keep doing the actions. And so it demands a significant amount of courage to create a significant life. Living a life of world-class and freedom is not living a courage-free life. It's building more and more courage. And we want to make a part of our identity that we do hard better. Too many people get to hard and then they stop. They stop showing up in the world. We've got to have a part of our identity that when I feel hard, that's when I put my foot on the gas. I go to that next level. Instead of assigning a level of difficulty before you start, people will feel hard and then they assign a level of difficulty where there is no such thing as hard or easy when we take action. Once we take action, you're in the spirit of it. You just are. That's your beingness. And that's what we have to understand. When I was attached to the results as my identity, I was giving all my power away. And I was either having a false sense of security in my self-esteem, or I was really low. And I was putting myself down. That's why everything just is. And that's why you don't beat yourself up. You have to hold yourself to a standard. You have to talk firmly to yourself without putting yourself down. However, you've got to give yourself grace. You have to, like I say about leadership, a great leader is demanding, not demeaning. We've got to demand a certain level of excellence for ourselves. Everybody wants the life of the top 1%, but they're not willing to do the things the top 1% do. And let me tell you this, the top 1% don't want to do those things a lot of the times, but they do them anyway. And then you know what? The minute they do it, they go, God, I'm so glad I did it. I'm so glad I did it. See, we have a moment. Go ahead.
I'm smiling because we're so in sync. That's exactly what I was about to say. I was about to say, look at someone who's achieved what you want. And sometimes we convince ourselves that they don't have hard days, they don't have hard circumstances, and they wake up every single day motivated and ready to do everything that they needed to do to get there. And it's just not the case. That's an area where we lie to ourselves because we want an out to not have to do something.
The top 1%, I could tell you this, and you could put it like this is a truth of all truth that I've discovered, is the top 1% fail more than the masses. They're willing to fail. Yeah. The masses try to be perfect. They try to be perfect. Oh, I got a plan to plan. I'll do this when I'm ready. I'll do this when I'm ready. And all they do is deplete their identity. That's all they're doing. Like, we're going to fail significantly today. And we're going to have a kick-ass day because of it. And I'm telling you, once you're willing to fail at your future self, you're going to win big. You're going to transform your identity. We have to understand that, but don't take my word for it. Go do it. Then you're going to see what I'm saying is accurate.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Arash, let's get into an action step for today.
Well, I want everybody to observe, when am I attached to the outside? When am I tying my identity to the outside? And look at what triggers it. And you've got to stop doing it. You've got to give yourself a command, and you got to change that story. And you want to start committing to taking one action, minimal, one action a day out of your comfort zone. It is going to transform your identity. And every time you notice my energy is down because I didn't get the result I wanted, I want you to stop it. I want you to give yourself and get into action in that moment. And if you do that, transforming your identity will be a natural part of progression and a way of being for you.
All right. Thank you, Araj, and thanks to all of you. If you enjoyed today's episode, please leave us a rating and review. Share this with your friends and family, and we'll see you next week on another episode of the 7-Figure Standard podcast. Thanks, Araj.
Thanks, Mikey.
Thank you for listening to this episode of 7-Figure Standard. We hope you found the insights and strategies helpful on your journey to success. If you enjoyed this episode, please leave us a rating and review on your favorite podcast platform to help us reach more people like you. To learn more about Arash and Mikey and how Voss Coach & Co. can help you achieve your goals and reach new levels of success, visit vosscoachandco.com. Thank you again for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode of 7-Figure Standard.